Next tonight, Cecilia and Florence have arrived in the UK, ready to bore their way through the Chiltern Hills. Those are the names given to HS2's two tunnelling machines. They'll work non-stop over the next 3.5 years on what is the cornerstone of the £106 billion project. But just down the road, protesters, including campaigner SWAMPY, were blocking a bridge in the hope that they can stop building work. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
In the middle of a river, on top of a bamboo tower, an eco-warrior is lying in a net, clutching a hot water bottle for comfort. His name is Daniel Hooper, the activist formerly known as SWAMPY. And he's here in Denham Country Park on the edge of London to try to stop HS2.
I do think it can be stopped because I think people are seeing the devastation. They're seeing the cost of it's going up and up.
How long are you prepared to stay on your perch?
Well, let's see how long it takes, eh?
SWAMPY first came to the public's attention more than 20 years ago when he took part in a series of high-profile protests against new roads. Today, his target is a temporary bridge which HS2 engineers want to put across the River Colne. SWAMPY is supported by a community of environmentalists who've been camped out in these woods for months. They're surrounded by an orange army of construction workers and security guards.
The activists might be determined, but HS2 has the full backing of the government. And just a few miles from here, work on the new railway has moved up a gear.
Just outside Denham is the most visible statement that this £106 billion railway is on track, the entrance to a pair of tunnels beneath the Chilterns.
It's a huge project, it's massive. We are going to do a twin tunnel, two tunnels in parallel, 16 kilometers long. So it's really a big project. Really challenging.
Before the digging can start, the engineers must first rebuild the 2,000-ton tunnel boring machines, which were made in Germany and then taken apart to be delivered as a flat pack. It's James Reilly's job to make sure it all goes back together in the right order.
I like to think of it as a big Meccano set. Personally, it's hugely exciting. I mean, to see all these parts here now is quite a big moment for me now. Been working with the project for 2.5 years, so now to actually see these parts here, it really shows that we're about to start this exciting project.
This is a huge site next to the M25. Its scale isn't lost on the protesters.
It's intimidating. It's a horror show, right? But that has to drive us forward into stopping it from happening all the way up the line.
HS2 says disruption caused by activists has cost more than £20 million. But SWAMPY and his friends aren't giving up. Simon Harris, ITV News, Denham.
Good evening. There were moments of celebration and some tears of joy as the NHS began its rollout of the coronavirus vaccination today. Here in London, 90-year-old DYER was the first patient to receive his jab. The retired butcher said he owed a debt to scientists that he could never repay. But amongst all the positivity, there came a warning from the Prime Minister. Cases here in the capital are rising and we are far from the end of the pandemic. Boris Johnson stressed that we haven't defeated the virus yet and we cannot afford to relax. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
George misses going to the shops. He misses people. But today, the 90-year-old retired butcher became one of the first Londoners to be vaccinated. The injection at Croydon's main hospital earned him a round of applause.
This horrible virus, it's something that none of us have ever experienced before. And the mere fact that these scientists can find something to combat it, you know, I think it's fantastic.
The excitement was shared by hospital staff. Catherine spent the day giving injections.
This morning I felt as if I am really glad to be part of history, because this is history in the making. In a few months or a few years' time, I think people will be looking back on this day, and I'm just excited to be part of it.
It takes around 15 minutes to process each patient. They'll need a second dose of the vaccine after 3 weeks.
This clinic alone hopes to have treated 1,000 people by the end of the week. But while the vaccine is an important milestone, it's set against a worrying backdrop.
Because in London and parts of Essex and Kent, the number of cases is going up.
What none of us wants is a surge in this virus leading to us going to tier 3 or even worse, another national lockdown.
When Lynn got her jab at Guy's Hospital in Southwark, the clapping was led by the Prime Minister.
I have been very isolated. My family don't live near me. lockdown was very difficult. I was unable to pursue the voluntary things that I usually do, working with children and going to church.
Are you getting one as well?
I don't. Well, I'm not in the priority group.
Boris Johnson echoed Sadiq Khan's comments about rising infection rates in London.
The virus is, alas, still rising in some parts of the country. It's rising, for instance, in London. We've got it down hugely as a result of the measures we took in November, which have just come off. People made a huge effort. We can't afford to relax now. And so my message would be, it's amazing to see the vaccine coming out. It's amazing to see this tremendous shot in the arm for the entire nation, but we can't afford to relax now.
Tonight, the number of Londoners with a treasured COVID vaccination card is in the hundreds, a tiny percentage of the population. But it's a start.
Simon, it's a start, but it's also an historic day. But it did come with a warning, didn't it, from the Prime Minister, because of the rising infection rates in London. Let's take a look, because more than 15,000 people tested positive for coronavirus in the past week, the highest number for any region in the country. 20 of the 32 boroughs now have rates higher than the England average, and 2/3 have seen an increase in cases in those round of those latest figures. So, Simon, there's still variations, though, aren't there, according to which area of London?
Yeah, Charlene, some boroughs are doing a lot worse than others. We talk a lot about that figure of the number of cases per 100,000, and in London at the moment, the average is 170 cases per 100,000 people. That's higher than the rest of England, where it's 149. But in the worst affected borough, Havering, it's closer to 320. And what's really worrying is that these figures are based on data from before we came out of lockdown, so last week. And there's a real concern that the easing of restrictions could see yet another spike in the number of infections. And next week, of course, is when ministers decide whether any areas can go down a tier or if some might have to go up into a higher tier and tighter restrictions.
OK, Simon, thank you. Veteran Labour MP Margaret Hodge today accused the government of dragging its feet over a planned crackdown on online abuse. Mrs Hodge, who was Jewish, said she was the target of a stream of anti-Semitic comments following the election of Jeremy Corbyn as Labour leader. She was speaking to our political correspondent Simon Harris for his political programme, The Late Debate.
Well, when Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party and anti-Semitism started finding its way from the fringes of the party into the mainstream, I started getting terrible abuse. And that is just pretty horrific. And some of them are horribly abusive. And
what sort of things do they say?
Well, I'll read, if I may, some of the awful stuff. So, for example, why has half of 1% of our population got so much power? Rid us of this cancer. I'm regularly called a Zionist stooge, a Zionist or a swastika is appropriate as Israel is a fascist state. And they mingle the fact that I'm Jewish together with the fact that I'm a woman, so there's a sort of mixture. The women get much more abuse, particularly online, than men, and the fact I'm old, so I'm not very often some old hag and a hag or something like that. And what it is, it feels sort of, if I can describe it, it's almost Orwellian.
What effect does it have on you?
Well, it's. I mean, I'm tough. I've been around politics for a very, very long time, but it's demoralising. It tears you apart. But I think that's what the abusers want. What I feel is they're trying to silence you.
Have you ever come close to resigning, giving it up?
On the back of the abuse, I'm tired of it. I'm tired, but I'm also a fighter. I think probably I've built that reputation through my years in public life, and I think it's unconscionable. It's intolerable, and it'll put off, the next generation from coming into public life. So I want to rid us of it.
The government is bringing in legislation, the online harms bill, but you don't think it's moving fast enough?
Well, I don't think anybody thinks it's moving fast enough.
Well, you can hear more of that Margaret Hodge interview on The Late Debate, which is coming up after news at 10. Simon will also be talking to MPs about the warnings of rising coronavirus rates here in London.